Hey everyone, and welcome back to Innovation Unplugged, the podcast where we explore bold ideas and the leaders behind these transformative technologies. I'm Jim Brismitzis, and today we're zooming into the edge, literally, with my friend Peter Thomson. He's the CEO of Nedge. Nedge is on a mission to expand cloud computing to the edge seamlessly. Their platform optimizes cloud apps for end-user remote computing by offloading and accelerating them at the edge with virtual cloud integrations. That helps enterprises unlock the power of the edge with speed, security, and scalability like never before, while retaining their existing cloud infrastructure. If you've ever wondered what it takes to make the edge native infrastructure truly seamless, you, my friends, are in the right place today. Let's get unplugged. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. We start every show with, what was the motivation of edge? What was the big problem trying to be solved? VDI and edge user computing has been around for many generations, but to the mission that you're on with Nedge hasn't been really done right with current cloud capabilities and technologies. And so with that, let's start with that question. What was the inspiration behind it, the big problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, I love that word, inspiration. So it all starts with trying to figure out a big pain. And I know that we've all experienced a similar pain. And going back to the pandemic, we really felt this. We're on a kind of a video feed now, takes up a lot of data to transmit this real time. So the problem really lies in unified communications being one of the most complex applications. So when you're running Zoom and Teams, you can constantly get problems with optimization that could lead to high latency, jitter, frame rate problems. And I know for a fact that all of us felt this during the pandemic when we all went remote. And that was really the genesis of the problem, but it goes back. It's actually predates that, going all the way back to 2015. Our CTO was the originator, the person, the brains behind the first mobile zero client device. Now, the zero client device is an amazing application or appliance because it's locked down. It really is secure. And that's great. I mean, if you're a CIO, you don't want people running rampant or going rogue. So you kind of box them in. They can't download anything to it, so it's locked down. The problem, though, is running complex applications. It just doesn't have the processing power. So that's really where the inspiration originated, is from our CTO, looking for better ways to get around running highly complex cloud applications on constrained devices.
Yeah, and that world of being able to support that isn't going to go away anytime soon, just because apps are the way that we interact with our data on a day-to-day basis. And to your point, making those apps available as a seamless experience to anyone, anywhere, in the fidelity that you do support with Nedge, I think is the game changer. So edge computing, though, Peter, has been chatted about quite a bit. And it's kind of like, it reminds me of the time of IoT, right? It's going to be this massive opportunity, and it's going to change how businesses operate. And for the most part, I think we could say we're on that second wave of IoT where it's now starting to make sense, primarily because we have this thing called AI that can make a ton of sense of the data that IoT is able to bring to market. What's different about where Nedge is today in that similar journey that Edge has been on as well?
Yeah, you're right. Edge computing is at an inflection point, and it's definitely going to catch on. Most of us are using the edge when we really don't even know we are. Yeah. So there are certain applications out there that are already feeding onto the edge. So it's all about getting as close to the end user device as possible. That's the critical path. And how we think of edge computing, for us, it means leveraging the high bandwidth and low latency of the last mile connection. Again, getting as close to that end user device as possible to shorten the distance so you don't have these issues with latency, jitter, frame rates, and alike. And you're also using the bandwidth more efficiently by interconnecting and interacting with the edge and the end user device, which may be as close as 25 miles or 50 miles. The problem when you run cloud apps directly from the cloud, sometimes you're thousands of miles away from the data center or that compute location. So that's where things really fall apart. But today, we're really attacking that problem by moving workloads off of end user devices that just don't have the processing power, such as a zero client or thin client device. As you move into more miniaturized devices, drones and whatnot, they're also going to have the same problem. So you're going to have to offload those workloads from those cloud applications running on those devices onto the edge and use that processing power there, and then visually integrate back to that cloud workspace. So it's all about meshing those two, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But what's important to know, to date, there's only been really 3 approaches to address this problem, and they're really just workarounds. One is like the full stack, what we call the full stack edge migration. It's where edge providers have taken all of the capability of the cloud and moved it down to the edge. Now, what's the problem with that? Super expensive. It's a very expensive process, and as you try and replicate it across thousands of locations that are closer to the end user devices, it gets very expensive. And then secondly, they've tried to boost the capability of cloud applications. For example, Zoom. Zoom strips away features and then creates a plugin that you can put on your end user device, and then that way it's using less processing power. What's the problem with that? You're stripping away features to make that work. So you're losing functionality and features. So also a workaround. And third, there's been a lot of talk about, and I think you just mentioned it, the web browser, secure browsers, and how that may supplant VDI. Well, actually, that's not going to happen. Here's a quote directly from a Gartner report that came out just a couple days ago. And it's that SEBs, these secure enterprise browsers, cannot address legacy infrastructure or non-web-based client apps, which require continued use of VDI and DAS. So that goes back to what you said earlier. It's here to stay. You can't do an end run.
Got it. So like with every one of our guests, I always like to take our listeners through that journey of what does it mean when you lift the hood of Nedge? What do you get? How does it, what does a typical deployment look like? So let's start there. What is Nedge to the enterprise? Assuming there's an enterprise client who's excited about what your technology can do, what can they expect in terms of that deployment experience?
Yeah, so in our case, we're focused on deploying as easy as possible. I mean, I think it goes without saying that enterprises are very concerned with complex deployments. That's just that's a non-starter in today's world, whether it be a SaaS or whether it be any type of cloud application, vertical AI, whatever it is, it has to be an easy deployment. So we focused on that from the very beginning. And we designed it in a way, first of all, that it can be either a public or a private deployment. When you think of public, you're talking not just about the public cloud, but really at the edge. And then private is more of that on-premise, traditional on-premise type of deployment. In our case, we're very serious about not disrupting the infrastructure that you currently have in place. We're trying to adapt to what you already have there. If you have a VDI, we work with that. If you're more web-based, we work around that infrastructure. So it's all about that. In the case of a VDI, we simply install a Nedge agent in the cloud workspace, and that runs all the applications that need to be routed into that Nedge node. The user can launch the accelerated app instead of the original right in the cloud. So that's without any disruption to the current infrastructure. Optionally, if there is a web-based type of infrastructure, we can actually route into that directly as well. And we can also work with our clients in deploying different end-user devices to the extent that they want to move down from a high-end, very expensive end-user device to something more constrained, like we talked about before, a zero client. That's not only constrained, but it's also less expensive historically. So we can actually make both the CIO and the CFO happy. Kind of a 2-for-1, if you will.
I love it. Let's talk about this in sort of the real world context, just to take that thread a little further. Let's say I'm a client and I'm using Amazon's workspaces or equivalent service on Azure, or even Citrix, right, who's been around the VDI space for a while. There's both brownfield and greenfield opportunities. And the brownfield opportunity, like an existing VDI solution, again, one of those vendors or others, Nedge sort of coexists there and provides the power of the, let's say, the fidelity of that experience and the security and such on a range of devices that may not have the computing horsepower locally to be able to provide that experience. Is that a fair way of saying it?
That is spot on. That's exactly what's happening.
And in Greenfield, where there is no VDI today, it is just out of the box. Nedge does what VDI is today, plus everything else we've just chatted about.
Yeah, and through a web browser, so we have that same experience, and that's important. What's also important to note is that we're not trying to replace anybody. This is complementary. So when you think about us, it's more of a mount than a replacement. And you can think of the infrastructure in a way that you have low level and you have a VDI instance or some sort of low level where you're launching the cloud app. And what we do is we provide layers on top of that. That's the mounting of the software, if you will. The first layer is that networking layer, because what we're trying to do with the networking layer is get you to the closest Nedge node or edge device possible, wherever that EUD is, so that you can effectively get the same user experience when you're on the go. It's all about being on the go in today's world. And that's really where we're going to be differentiated. Now, you take it down from the networking layer into the workload layer. The workload layer is running the real-time apps at the edge. Now, this is very important. A lot of edge infrastructures, typically are running Linux apps, but we can run both Windows and Linux. All right, that's a major benefit because we already know what most of the corporate world's using Windows. All right, so we actually provide that capability as a mounted layer on top of the infrastructure, and that last layer is our differentiator. And that's the meshing layer. The meshing layer is essentially when we take a workload off of the end user device, move it onto the edge and run it there, we need to real time visually integrate back into the EUD so that the user has no loss in their experience. It's exactly like the native experience they would expect if they were running a desktop app. That's how cool this is. So and that's the real differentiator that the engineering teams have been able to pull off. It's incredible stuff.
Excellent. So from an industry perspective, clearly any industry where you have a lot of remote workers, field service, mining, where are you seeing really the most interest from an industry perspective?
Well, I think that some of the things that you and I have been talking about are very interesting, and we can do that. But, I think in the government space, you hear a lot about zero trust architecture. We kind of lean in on zero trust architecture because to really be compliant, you need to deploy hardened, rugged devices that are locked down. I mean, that's the only way to guarantee that your end users are acting in a way that you want them to be compliant with the zero trust. And the zero trust compliance list is enormous. It's voluminous. There's 70 plus items that you have to adhere to. But we actually make it possible to deploy and run any type of cloud apps on these zero client or thin client devices. In today's world, if you can believe it, Jim, you will have, in some cases, end users will have two devices in front of them. One will be the high-powered device, and then the other will be the constrained device. That doesn't make sense to us. There should be one device, and we hope that it's the one that's the more economical of the two. And you consolidate all your work on that, and all we do is take the more complex workloads and run them on the edge as opposed to directly on the end user device. So that could apply to the government, finance, healthcare, wherever there is a high security issue where there could be breaches and penetration. We need to be there to work with them and deploying that architecture that complies.
So one of the areas I think that might be super helpful for clients, or rather enterprises listening in today, is where you can, and without divulging anything confidential, can you take us through a typical client deployment? What is that like, and what have those clients, given all the great things we talked about Nedge being able to support today, what are you seeing in terms of their feedback and why they're loving the solution? One
of the deployments has been with one of the military branches. and they have a division that has, I think it's about 10,000 zero client devices. Now, they suffer two problems. One is that they are not being able to run all of these apps that they would like to run on a single device. So we give them the ability to merge all that activity onto a single device, which is the zero client device, which makes the CIO happy and the CFO happy, that you can work within one environment that's more efficient and more effective. The second thing that we're doing there is a protocol translation. They do not want to upgrade. And this is one of the problems with VDI and DAS and whatnot. There's constant upgrading. And when you do that, when you upgrade to another version, it typically comes with a cost. They don't want to leave their environment. They want to be able to use the same environment without having to port over. So what we do is we do a protocol translation that allows them to keep their current version, but get access to the new version's capabilities. And that's how we integrate with the VDIs, is through their protocols. And that gives us the ability to route and control the activity that's being driven through that particular VDI instance.
Awesome. How much of
Jim, I'm sorry. You asked for the metrics. Sorry. So the metrics is important here. Just to give you an idea of the improvement in latency, we are able to move that from well over 100 milliseconds down to under 10. That's the kind of that's one example of a metric. We have metrics and benchmarking for all of the potential improvements that you can see in the delivery of data through the infrastructure. But that's one that's actually everybody actually raises their eyebrows to, like, wow, that's where we need to be.
No more choppy experiences, just seamless app experiences. Awesome. It sounds like some of what Nedge is capable of could be deployed by a customer, but for any partners who are listening in today, this sounds like also a strong services opportunity for them as well, as they want to help their clients modernize for the edge and those applications on the edge as well for workers that need to get exposure to them. Is it a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. I think that's one of the lessons learned. You and I've had this conversation about what has Nedge learned through this process, and one thing is patience. You have to be patient when you're doing low-level coding. But the other thing is you when you're working in this deep tech space, you really have to count on partnerships. Partnerships is a key component, and we designed and architected Nedge around the concept of interoperability from day one. And that is critical, not only from a technology partnership standpoint, but also from distribution. We don't want to be reinventing the wheel every time we go out and deploy.
Yeah, you bet. Well, for any partners listening in, you heard it straight from Peter. There's a great opportunity for new services to your clients, give them much better experiences clearly, and more secure apps on the edge as well. With that, Peter, let's kind of end on, where do you see the future of Edge going now? I think we're approaching a second wave where Edge is becoming much more topical for all good reasons, primarily because to the solution you've built with Nedge, it's very unlikely for enterprises of all sizes to try to replicate the cloud at every location where they need to be, right? So Edge is going to really start to take place. And then as the popularity and the use of AI and AI data continues to explode, we're going to see a lot more of that on the edge too. But I'm curious to get your perspective, given how deep you are in this ecosystem.
Yeah, well, for us, it really begins with security. Everything we're trying to do goes back to security. That's partly why we architected our platform in a way that we kind of think of it as a closed, quote unquote, closed appliances on the edge. And that is all about moving transitory data, but not necessarily storing data at rest. So we're encrypting in transit, and then being able to adhere to the zero trust architecture and the kind of the remote browser isolation rules. I mean, that is important to us. So it all starts there. Now, when you think about where this is going, I mean, and I think I started off by talking about this, edge computing is definitely, and I agree with you, is an inflection point. It's kind of moving beyond the experimental pilots and niche deployments to becoming a foundation, an integral layer of the enterprise infrastructure. And one of the things, issues with the edge is it's very distributed, so it's kind of chaotic, right? Yeah. The cloud is not. The cloud is centralized. But we know that we need to move closer to the edge for the reasons I told you before. Yeah. Those problems still persist. So we're working around those and making sure that we have an incredible user experience. The other thing that we've been able to crack the code on, I'm just going to mention as an innovation, we've been able to figure out containerization, which is another big issue in the cloud down to the edge. Typically, if you can believe this, typically a container instance will only run 1 or 2 programs at a time. We figured out by mounting our own proprietary software how to run over 10 applications simultaneously in one container instance. No one's been able to do that. Probably no one should have tried it, but we did, and we made it work after a couple of years.
Yes, you guys did.
So we cracked the code. Now, we are absolutely excited about the future. We think that there's a number of things happening that will really continue to evolve on the edge. And one of them is, like spatial computing and also touchless computing. That's going to happen. There's no doubt in my mind. And when you move into that realm, you're actually moving into more miniaturized devices. So it just calls on the need for Nedge and being able to run those workloads on the edge more efficiently and more effectively. That's really where we have a lot of our focus as this rolls out, and being able to run our applications on any device is our mantra, and being able to bring that user experience to everyone on the go, which is another thing that you touched on, which you're absolutely right. This is all about being remote.
Yeah. Peter, we love the excitement, love the opportunity that you've pursued with Nedge. We're grateful for the chance to work with Nedge here at Chasm Labs. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for your time today and for sharing with us your experiences and what's really happening in the edge as well. And so today, that wraps up our conversations with Peter Thomson, CEO of Nedge. Thank you all for sharing how your team is redefining what it means to bring cloud-native infrastructure to the edge in simplicity and power. For our listeners, if your business is exploring edge computing, or should be, Nedge is definitely a company to be watching. And feel free to reach out to us. Obviously, we'd love to make those connections back into Peter. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review for today's episode, and share this with anyone who's navigating the future of cloud, networks, and edge native transformations. Until next time, keep innovating and stay unplugged. And again, Peter, thank you again for offering your time to be with us.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be here.